Hello and welcome back to another episode of Art of Science. My name is Graham Ambrose. I am an assistant professor at North Carolina State University and your host here on Art of Science. Art of Science is a quarterly interview podcast that coincides with each issue of Policy Studies Journal. And just to start off the bat, wherever you're kind of listening, it's just a reminder to rate, review, and subscribe our podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce Yixin Liu, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Politics and International Affairs at Northern Arizona University. The November issue of PSJ is actually the first issue where PSJ is introducing its shorter article format, which is articles that are around 3,000 to 5,000 words. And the first format is the research note, which is empirical work with narrower contributions than a full article. And the second short article format is perspectives, which is around theoretical work presenting novel theory and arguments. So in this November issue, Dr. Liu published a research note entitled Partisan Collaborations and Policy Adoption, an experimental study with local governmental officials. At a high level, Dr. Liu examines how partisanship plays a role in the collaborative strategy of policymakers and sought to understand the effects of co-partisanship attributes such as resource allocation, reciprocal trust, and policy outcomes. While he explores these factors, he finds co-partisanship increases the likelihood of policy adoption by 12.75 percentage points and enhances the favorability of collaborative attributes. So with that, just thank you for being here today. And I just want to start off with asking you to kind of dig in deeper to the paper and what's going on.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. And this is a very great opportunity for me to introduce my work to the PSJ audience here. So as I think Graham, you already gave a very great introduction for this article, and it is also part of my dissertation. So it is really an honor to be published in PSJ, one of my favorite policy journals in the field. So I study like how the local government officials, their willingness to collaborate with each other, especially in the local jurisdiction setting, that can be affected like by different aspects and attributes. So here I specifically focus on the partisanship. So how the partisanship can introduce, I would say, like some bias or like their inferential factors to affect their mindsets to whether or not to collaborate with to be another party or another city. So I think this is very interesting because a lot of discussions about like partisanships in policy process are like in a higher level, like a state level or in the national level. But I think like it is also a very good chance for us to understand the local government setting. And I think this is also a very important aspect for interlocal collaborations. Right. So there's a lot of like studies already cover something like ideology or isomorphism and other things to affect people's willingness to adopt policies or willingness to collaborate with each other. But I think it is very surprisingly few studies to cover like the partisanship in this level of the governments to affect their willingness to collaborate. That's why I like to do this study. And the other reason for doing this is kind of because like so a lot of factors to affect collaborations are discussed on the at the organizational level or network level. So we study like how different interactions in the network and organizational factors or institutional factors can affect people's willingness to collaborate, or not people's willingness to collaborate, but organizations' willingness to collaborate. But again, like organizations are grouped by people, so and also they have decision makers and leadership. So it is very important for us to also understand like those policy leaders, policymakers, in the local level their opinions to collaborate with each other. So I'm lowering down the unit of analysis for the traditional collaboration studies from the organizational level and to the individual level. So although we still have a lot of like individual surveys to understand like those network analysis, network factors, but most of those surveys they care about like activities on the organizational level, right? So those survey items are about like the organizational level factors. But here I specifically just test their individual partisanship affiliations can affect their willingness to collaborate, and also I use a leverage from a conjoined experimental environment, so can causally identify these partisanships to their effects on policy collaboration. I think this is very important because it is very hard to detect the partisanship, because like some people, if you just directly ask them their opinion about, hey, if whether or not you want to collaborate with another party or outsiders of your own party, maybe a lot of people will say yes. It is what we call like the social desirability bias, right? So but I create this kind of like a conjoined environment that we not only putting the partisanship information, but also put a lot some other informations to confound them, right? So they don't know our own real purposes in this survey, right? So it is like the partisanship is kind of hiding among these factors. So that's why it is a good chance for us to detect the real effect of the partisanships on the policy collaboration. So, and I also use a kind of like a more like a neutral policy case, which is sustainability development, that I introduced like this hypothetical policy, have like three different aspects: environmental, economic, and also I don't remember the other one, but it is in my paper. So it's like I'm kind of like balance the left and right, there are different interests in this policy choice. So it is not make people like feel like we are more lean to liberal or conservative in the policy choice. So in this case, we can balance like to see the two parties, their different perspectives in this policy collaboration. So the answer and the result is very promising. It's like it is an important factor, and also if they have these partnerships, collaboration in their mind, it also can affect how they will rate the importance of other factors, such as like the reciprocity, such as whether or not they trust each other, such as whether or not the economic or the policy outcomes are important in their mind. So and also like break it down into like different subgroups, and also based on their different characteristics, such as whether or not they are city managers, which are appointed official, or elected official like the mayors and councillors, or break it down then by their career patterns, like how many years they're sitting in their positions, and some other like their characteristics. So I find that it's a very consistent pattern for this difference in co-partisanship or out-partisanships can affect whether or not they favor a policy collaboration proposal from the other city. So it is like, so based on all these findings, I think the partisanship effect is very robust for us to understand. And we can also try to think about like future research agenda and future research questions to further understand this in a more specific, some other policy domains to understand this phenomenon. So I think that's the study.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate this like synopsis of it. I know one thing that I really enjoyed, and you kind of hit both of these points, but you kind of bring this partisanship component to the kind of public manager, if that's the city manager or a mayor. And in that way, it very nicely bridges the kind of PA side and the political science side, which in a lot of ways is what policy process is trying to do, right? So thinking about the partisanship of political science, but also the decision maker that's actually making a decision, the mayor, and the actions of the manager as well. So I really enjoyed the kind of like embodiment of what policy process is in this kind of straddled field in that question. And also, I just really enjoyed, I know both of us are kind of collaborative governance researchers, but really emphasizing the role of individual decision in that collaborative space. I think that was really interesting to me. And again, kind of gives this really strong policy process lens to collaboration in a field that is less focused on the individual, as you've already identified, and you explain really well in the paper as well. With that, you talked about the conjoint analysis, and I'm curious if you'd be willing to kind of dig into that a little bit further. I know this is kind of like an emerging type of analysis, but just talking about how you set out, why you picked conjoint, and how you set up those vignettes as well. What were you thinking about?
So let me briefly introduce this method. So it is very widely used methods in both political science and also in public administration fields. So it starts by the scholars in political science, they study the discrimination issue. So they study discrimination issues for like the immigrants. So the issue to study the discrimination about immigrants is that, again, it is social desirability bias. So because nobody will say that they discriminate anybody, right? So or at least in the publicly to express their discrimination to anybody. It is very weird situation that people will admit their discrimination. So then how to detect these discrimination issues or the problems, especially to facing the immigration policy. So is that like the scholars, they try to package a lot of the characteristics that those people can rate. And when they choose to favor or disfavor immigrants. For example, their age, for example, their gender, for example, where are their original countries, and what's their what they're doing, or how long they already spent in the U.S. And a lot of factors, right? So it's like they can just put all these factors together in a conjoint table. And it is not like a traditional experiment, a Viennese experiment, or a traditional survey that you only to answer like those traditional survey items. But they show you a table with like two or even multiple different immigrants, their profile, right? Something like their CVs or resumes. So it has a lot of characteristics there. And the amazing thing is that, so in each of these characteristics, or what they call is like each of their attributes, such as like gender, age, country, or any other things. So they randomly assign the values of in each of these attributes in the same time, right? So it's like not like the traditional survey or factual survey experiment that we only randomize one thing in one time. But in the conjoint setting, they randomly assign things together, similarly together. So the good thing is that you can confound the survey respondents that you don't know what's the true purpose of this survey. So and then because you have many things there, right? So you don't know what they're testing you, and as a survey respondent. So the good thing is that when they're answering this survey, they have to like trade off like different these factors, such as like the age, like their gender, like other things. Maybe I favor maybe one person, they favor a female, but they dislike people from a developing country, right? So, but if they package all these things together, you need to trade off whether you feel like the gender is more important or the country the person is from is more important, right? So in this way, they can detect people's preference on these attributes, and they can even rank the importance of these attributes by their answer. And also, amazing thing about this is not only for the attribute design, it is also about how you can detect their answers. So they're not asking you to only answer like 1 to 7, dislike to like, right? But they ask you to pick the candidate. So only like candidate 1 and candidate 2, and then you ask you to pick whether to choose the one you like from A or candidate 1 or candidate 2, right? So in this way, you have to trade off. You have to choose the one you like better. And in this way, that you have no like the middle ground to say, okay, I'm fine with both of them, but you have to trade off. So in this way, you force them to choose to state their preference. So in this way, it is I think it's a good method to study those very difficult questions or very difficult questions that people don't want to answer directly. And also, this kind of method has also a very good aspect to increase the statistical power, because you can show them multiple sets of the candidates, as the example I show you. So you can say, okay, this is candidate A and B, and next set I show you candidate C and D. But you just randomize the things the same way, but because it's randomly assigned, so they will not see the same candidate in each page. So you can just do this like 3 or 4 times and even more. So in this way, you can use the profile. So each of the candidate profile as your unit of analysis. So think about that. You survey one person and ask them to evaluate 3 sets of profiles, and so 3 pairs of profiles. In this way, like you already have 6 profiles for 1 respondent. So it's like you largely increase the statistical power, and also you can just use the cluster standard errors in the individual level to control for one person answer all these questions together, than to have a good estimate. So I think this is a very good tools and techniques to study this difficult question. And recently, scholars try to use this to study like the questions in different policy areas, not only for the immigration issue in discrimination, or sometimes they use this to predict people's preference in the election, right? Which of the candidates you like to vote. And also we can use to predict people's preference for policies. So it's like, this is very important for environmental policy, because the environmental policy has multiple dimensions. And the other thing I forget to mention, the good aspect of this design is that you can test multiple things in the same time. So it's like you can put all these things together, and then it's just like OLS with like multiple variables in the regressions, right? So just like the environmental policies or sustainability policies, that you have economic factors, environmental factors, and also like you have like effective factors, equity factors. So you can put all these things in one table and study people's preference and to rank those preference for each of these attributes to see which one is even more important in their minds. So that's why I think this fit with my research purpose very well. So first, I study partisanship. It is a very difficult question. So we want to detect people's real perspectives on this question. So that's why we want to package the partisanship information with some other informations together. And also policy collaboration. It is a multi-dimensional decision, right? So we decide to collaborate with another city or another organization, it is not only based on my partisanship information. It's based on a lot of things. So then we can package these things together and to study not only for the partisanship but also other collaboration attributes. So I choose those collaboration attributes so it's like the policy outcome, also the policy process, which is whether or not you have the interactions with them, and also it's like the allocation of the benefits, because whether or not you see the input, it is fair enough, right? So this like three-dimensional factors, they have been established very well in the policy collaboration or in general collaborative governance literature. But we didn't try to integrate them with the partisanship. It is very individual, but also is very institutional factor to drive the government's decisions in a lot of situations. So I think that based on these like two reasons, first, it is important to use this method to study partisanship, and also it can help us to not only study partisanship, but also compare it with other factors and also have to interact with other factors. So based on this consideration, I think this is appropriate for me to use in this study.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate walking through that as well, because I think we often see these kind of analyses that are gaining popularity, but just kind of your walking through of why it's important in this case and what it's actually leveraging, I think is incredibly helpful. One kind of thing that I have before transitioning to our next question is, I also really enjoyed in the paper your first paragraph really identifies the logic of why collaborative policymaking should be beneficial if we take it at this very rational approach. But it also outlines why this kind of rationality falls apart. And I'm curious if you could just talk briefly around like where these ideas of and interests around individual decision making, but also partisanship kind of comes together. Because you lay it out very clearly in that first paragraph. So I'm curious where that kind of logic or that interest comes from for you.
Yes, I think so. I studied collaborative governance in my very beginning. I studied this is to understand the theory about the rational choice, right? So like the traditional rational choice theory tells us that if you aggregate people's choice together, and then it can be like explained by those rational factors to explain, because people want to have more benefits than the cost when they do the decision makings. Also include collaboration decisions, right? So this stream of the literature is very kind of influential in our field. And I would say that one of the very enlightenment papers I remember is published, is how many years ago, is from APSR, is like, I think it's 2005, from Leach and Sabatier and other folks. They compare the rational choice factors like the cost benefits, transaction costs, and other things, and with the behavioral factors, like the policy belief, like something related to ACF, right? So they compare this stuff. So they run regression, only have the rational choice factors, and then they run another regressions to with those behavioral factors. So they find out that all those significant, like not all, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember that. So a lot of like significant findings in the rational choice disappear when you put those behavioral factors together. So it means that our policy choice or our policy choice in collaboration, it is not only affected by those rational choice, and in a lot of situations, rational choice doesn't work. And it is very important for us to study, because if the public officials not lay people, but they are public officials, and they are doing to make the decisions for the public. And if they are not value the rational choice for the benefit their own communities, to increase the gain the maximum benefits for their communities, but for some other factors, that can be like problematic for our community. So I would not say all those choices can be problematic, but if the choice is not like the optimum choice, that we still can have a room to improve, right? So that's why I want to study like how to improve people's decision makings, especially for our field. We study public officials and their policy choice, and that's why I think it is important question, and also help me to answer the so what questions to in a research article. And I think it is very important in realities for in practice for policy process as well.
Wonderful. I think we all have additional reading to do after you brought that paper up, but I'm curious too. So after reading that paper, the Yixin Liu paper, how does that connect? Like, what was the process of connecting from like having those interests in rational and behavioral models to kind of getting to this specific paper and these specific questions?
Well, I always feel like I stand on the shoulders of the giants. It is not only for one this paper, and so also for other papers. It's like, so I studied this paper, and as well as another paper really drive me to do this study when I was a first year PhD student. That is the paper I read in my advisor Frank Barry's class. Frank Barry is very established scholar for policy adoption and policy innovation. So she shared one paper that is so her own model of policy adoption. It is in the state level or in the organizational level to see the internal factors and external factors to affect the government's adoption decision. And in one class, I remember she shared a paper for us to read, which is from Daniel Butler and his co-author, to study the policy adoptions in the perspective of partisanship. So what I did is that same sample as what I use. So I think they are the first team to use the local government policy leaders sample, including the mayors and the councilors. So they study how these partisanships can affect the government's their decisions to do the policy adoption and policy innovations. So it's like how it can affect their policy learning process, right? So traditionally, in the policy adoption literature, we study like these factors in organization or government level, but a lot of these decisions actually has a big influence by those policymakers, individual policymakers. So, and if you only study the organizational level, it is very hard to capture something individually like the partisanship or ideologies and this stuff. That's why they try to say we can lowering down the unit analysis. And I think like there's a sentence is really catch me in their paper is like the problem for this field it is too aggregate. It is too late. What it means is that too aggregate means that we always do use the aggregate units to study this discretion, and we cannot detect the individual level decision. And it's too late is like all the data you collect is after the policy adopt, right? Then you have the policy information data. So you study by then, but you don't know how like people their like motivations be like before they actually make this decision, right? So what drive them to make these decisions before you even have this data in your mind, in the observational setting. So it is very hard for us to gather the observational data in that kind of situation to study like people's decision even right before they make the adoption decision. So that paper became very famous in the policy adoption field in political science. And I just feel like after I integrate like this work from the collaborative governance field and also from the policy adoption field, I feel like collaborative governance also have very similar problems here. So I think it's even more relevant for our field because for a lot of like collaboration data or the network analysis data that we have to collect it after you have those network activities start or complete, right? So it is very hard to observe something at the beginning. It's very beginning that people, even in their mind, that they think about these issues, but not apply it yet. So in this way, I feel like I can also just think about like how to contribute this to our field in the individual level, and that's why I think like this is also a very good connections to connect the rational choice part and also the behavioral public administration or behavioral science in the general to understand like people's not on people's decision making not only for the rational patterns that we can observe in the aggregate settings, but we can also try to detect this in the individual level to see whether or not this is even happening. So that's why I just integrate these two kind of thoughts together and try to make this effort participative to this paper. But the process is very painful. It's like the data collection, it is very hard. And
that was actually the next question that I was going to ask you, right? So you had talked about this, kind of starting this idea in your first year of your PhD, and it also being a part of your dissertation, now being published in PSJ. Would you be willing to talk about like the pains that came along with that process and those components as well?
Sure. And so I think it is also a good chance to share some like thoughts to if that can help for the PhD students to start their dissertation journey. And so as I mentioned, I have this idea in my first and second years. I think this is amazing, and I want to apply this. But it is very aggressive and very ambitious decisions, and I didn't know whether or not I can do that. And then when I was at FSU, I have to say there's a very good program for undergraduate study. So the undergraduate students, they have a chance to work with the doctoral students or professors or postdocs to do like a 1-year research, and that can become, I think that can become into their academic credits. So as a PhD student, I can work with like 2 undergrad students, and then we can help them in this process. The undergrad students, they can help me to collect the data and do this research together. And another part, I can also teach them, mentor them in this process to help them to understand how to do a research, and they eventually need to present their work at the universities to show their accomplishments in this year. So I think this is a very good combination between teaching and research. And it also is a very good chance for undergraduate students who want to prepare themselves for the grad schools to touch the base about research and what research looks like in this process. So that's why I recruit these 2 very talented students in my to group this team. And I didn't have the great resource like other like a very established team to study these questions but I estimate the power of what kind of enough like the power of to launch these experiments. So one thing I really realistic consideration is that I don't think I have the capacity to gather a very large set of data in that point of time. So I need to think about like if I have like a relatively smaller number of respondents, but I can also still answer my research questions. So that's why after I study these conjoint experimental methods, I think that if even if I only like gather like 300 subjects, we can still like increase it into like 2,000 observational units, right? So this is inspirational by the work from Sebastian Yoga. Their work in JPAR, very first paper used a conjoint experiment to study the discrimination issues to public school students. So I think, and their sample is like 300. I feel like, okay, the bottom line is that if I have like 300 and I have like 4 or 5 attributes, it should be enough for the power detection. So that's my very original plan. And I need to calculate, and another part is that I need to calculate like the response rate. So this one is unpredictable. And you can see that the response rate is going down and down recently.
Yes.
In Daniel Butler, their very first paper, they use this method, use this sample. Their response rate, I think, is over like 20%. It's like, wow. Right? So, but recent years, you see all these papers related to local government officials or even like state legislatures, that response rate is of course is lower than 10%. Some of them are lower than 5%. So it is much lower recently. So I would say like about if I can sample about like 10,000 respondents, it can be possibly like if I have like less than 10%, it still can have like hundreds of valid responses. So this is the goal. This is very original goal. So and then I started doing this. And to gather to try to go to each of these city governments' websites. So what I did is that I set a threshold for the population level for the city. So I set like a medium and large the city, because based on the period studies, the larger cities, they are more likely to answer your survey. And it is also like you cover the populations in, so it is like cover like more than 2/3 of the populations in this country if you have this relatively medium and larger cities in your sample. So I use this sample, and then it is like about more than 1,000 or more cities. I don't remember the exact numbers, but and then if in January, many of the cities have like about like 10 public officials, and you gather this data. So I gathered this data together with my 2 undergrad students. We work together with them, and they're very helpful, and they're very like self-disciplined students, and they also want to learn more about this decision-making process. And especially one student, she mentioned to me that she want to pursue a economic degree to understand like a grad school economic degree to understand the human decision making. So I think that it can be a process to help her to make this choice. And after like it is a very painful situation. We use like about like 1 year to gather this contact information of the local officials, and then I send this out the invitations for these public officials. So and then it's like, but sending out is not very long. So it only takes me like 1.5 months. It's like 3 waves, like 1 survey invitation and 2 reminders. And then eventually we gather about like, I think it's about roughly 1,000 respondents, but many of them are like only answer 1 or 2 questions, or only open the survey and close it. So we drop those part of the sample, because we have to only include the sample who have identified their partisanship information that we can match with their choices in the survey, right? So after we clean up the data, so eventually we have like more than 700 participants, valid respondents in our sample. This is very it is a very cool result. It's a very promising result that I was super happy about that because it is like about like 8% of the response rate, if I remember correctly. And it is even higher than many of the other studies in this field. So and also another thing is that because the survey itself is very short, it's only like 3 or 5 minutes. Before I decided, I even make a very short like Zoom interview to Daniel Butler to get some guidance for doing this, because I was like, I didn't even know whether or not this is very risky for me in my career to do this very aggressive research. But very lucky. I think it is a success. So and also because it is in the middle of the pandemic. It is even make these things harder to make sure. So all the data collections and all the meetings with my 2 research assistants are all happening online. So but I really appreciate like these efforts. And also after all this done, these 2 students, they use this data because we are not only collecting the data of this the survey, but we also collect some data about like the gender information for these public officials and some other backgrounds. So they use those descriptive information to do a gender representation studies for local government officials, and it is very cool as well. And also it is very interesting pattern that although about like 70% of the local government officials are male, but we have the females, their response rates are higher than males. So I think this can be also a future directions for us to study their responsiveness for the local governments by different their characteristics. So that's the story about like my research process. But to submit this paper to PSJ it is not painful at all. It is very it is very responsive from the PSJ part, and the review process is very smoothly. I appreciate that.
I have 2 questions coming off of your story, and I guess the first one is you in your story here have talked about kind of being a little bit more aggressive and trying to get that data, but also the risk that comes along with it. So I'm curious if you could just talk through kind of that trade-off in your mind. And I think maybe in hindsight you can say it paid off, right? But in the moment, right, like knowing that it's riskier, knowing that's a little bit more aggressive, can you just talk about that decision making and that balance as you kind of remember thinking about it?
So I think the first thing is what can make me confident about this in the first stage was that I got a very good support from my advisor, Fran Barry. So Fran gave me a very good support to set this for me to always encourage me to, and always like want to help me to become successful. And she gave a lot of like courage to me to do this. She's the I would say the most important person to make me to feel this must be done. And another thing is that I think this model is also fit with many other people in their PhD lives, that you should have like multiple projects work in the same time, right? So it's like you are not putting all the apples into one bucket, right? So you have like more people to work in different stages. And also because my model is like the free essay model for the dissertation. So, and also I have some other co-authoring papers as well. And this kind of like you have like multiple projects you're doing at the same time but in different stages. You can just mitigate your you're kind of nervous for the failure of one project, right? So it's like kind of like I already know that some of my other papers has already have very good progress. So I think that it is no harm to try. It's like to make this, and I think one of the things that a scholar should have is to take the risky, to make the challenging research, because like if your research is too easy, then it is maybe it's not worth it to try. So I think that is also another thing I really believe. And I want to try something different. I want to try something that people haven't tried it yet. So and this population of the public officials, I would say this is a investment for me. So it's like I'm not thinking about only do this in one shot, but I'm thinking about like I was thinking about do this every single year. So I can, if I have this data, and I will recollect and revise this data more like easily based on their so it can be a lot of potential, right? So first you can study like their like turnover, right? Because they have turnover maybe every single year, and a city government, their election or their appointments are very in a very random process. It's not like the national ones. So you can just like go back to this data every year, and then to have this, maybe you have like five or 6 years later, then it can be a panel data of the turnovers for these people. And I haven't seen this data yet in our field also. And also another is that I can use this to build a kind of a like longitudinal survey. So I can survey these people like every single year with different themes, but also have some similar questions that I can make these questions longitudinal. And also like it is can be a resource, like a sunk cost for me to do this. So after I finish this, I can repeatedly to use this for other research questions to study local governments officials, their collaboration decisions, especially in the sustainability field. That is the field I research. And so after this first year, so this paper is like is very good like signal for me after I finish this paper. I try to like kind of persuade some other scholars to work with me and to work with me to do this together. So eventually now we have a team. So we call this like policy green, and we send out the survey, the annual survey to the public officials each year to see their collaborative strategies to sustainability issues. So always it has a risk, but at the very beginning, I will say that I want to do this not for the one time, but I want to do this repeatedly, and it can be a research resource or even a research brand for myself. So it is a good way to establish my tenure track career. And yeah, so now we have like I think we already sent out like 3 in the last 3 years. So we have like complete like 2 more surveys after this first one. So this one is the most difficult one, and the other ones are because I have more collaborators. So collaboration matters, and we work this together, and we can have more ideas to brainstorm a lot of things and do this in different ways. So now I'm also like thinking about to expand this data to not only for the elected officials, but also for the department heads, such as the water supply and also public works, to send out these surveys to this subgroup of people. So yeah, so it's like a growing of this research sample, but it always has risks. But I think it is a very good investment, and yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think the points that you highlighted is something that a lot of guests on this podcast have highlighted, right? So especially as a junior scholar, having that support and good relationship with mentors, but also seen it as the kind of a long-term investment, right? So it's risky and aggressive and a lot of work. But it's a profile then, right? It's not one paper. It's just really interesting to kind of hear that echoed across all of these podcasts and all these kind of takeaways. So I really appreciate that. And again, it just kind of brings back all these other comments from other researchers as well. I do want to ask you, because you're one of the first research notes that are coming out of PSJ. I'm just curious if you could just talk a little bit about that process, particularly the difference between having this kind of short. I know I really enjoyed your article because it was fast, punchy, and like direct to the point. But kind of writing a research project like that compared to a full article that might be 8, 10, or 12,000 words.
Well, I think PSG already set a very good like the requirement or their expectations for the short article section. So I think for this in protocol part of the short article sections, the PSJ, they want us to have the contributions for like to use the innovative methods to study a policy problem, or to have a narrow policy a narrow theory process, narrow policy process theory focus of a specific but important question, right? So for this paper, I think it fit very well with the method innovation, because in the policy collaboration, as I mentioned, so the unit of analysis are different different than the traditional policy collaboration studies, and also there's no like I would say very few experimental studies to study the study use the experimental methods to study collaborative governance. So you can see that there's the experimental methods are very popular in many other fields, like to study administrative burden, to study performance evaluations, and a lot of other fields in public management and also policy perceptions. But for the policy collaboration, or in general collaborative governance, it is very few study, because I understand that for the nature of collaboration is always have the interactions between like A and B, like two different organizations or individuals, right? So you need to link those interactions together with them. But for experimental studies, if you only like to have like one aspect or one like part of the information, then you don't have their collaborators, their information. It is very hard to connect this. But conjoint experiment, it is very special setting, right? So you ask your respondents to pick up your collaborators and from A or B, right? So it is part of kind of like to simulate the idea of to have the network connections with another party. Although it is very hypothetical situation, still it is the first step. So I think that fit with the perspective or the focus of the research node in the PSJ. And also, I think it is kind of like a narrow research question, because the partisanship itself, it is only like one part out of many other attributes in policy collaboration. So I focus in this very narrow one part for this paper, but it is important, right? So the partisanship is important, but it is a narrow aspect of the full picture of policy collaboration. So I think these 2 points: first, we need to have a narrow focus for a very special research question, and also we have the method innovations for policy process. I think I really appreciate these 2 parts, and I think more like policy and public administration journals should have the short article sections, because it really encourages like PhD students and early careers scholars who have like to have like, because when we start to think about like the research question in our early stage career, we always think about some narrow, but we think something is very important, right? So in many situations that we don't need 8,000 or 10,000 words to write a full article to describe this question. But if we don't study some of these questions, it doesn't mean that these questions are not important, right? So we may miss a lot of important questions, but only because they have a narrow focus, or only because we need some alternative methods to reevaluate some established theory in our field, right? So I think these two parts are both important for the future directions for the research, and they are valuable. So I think I really appreciate these short article sections for PSJ. It is very good steps for encourage more and more like young scholars and early career scholars to contribute their work.
Yeah, and only to add to that, I think the value of the smaller articles too is I can very much see myself assigning this article in my policy process class, right? It's, again, very punchy, straight to the point. It has good theory, but it's very direct theory. So not only is it good for young scholars like us, but I think even trying to explain these really kind of critical points in a fast and direct way to masters or undergrad is important too. So yeah, I agree. I really love these new shorter formats. But as we come up on the hour here, I just want to ask if you just have some broad advice that you would kind of give yourself, or as a younger version of yourself, or just younger scholars in general.
So I would say is to be innovative. Don't afraid to try difficult things or uncertain things, and also always to think about like to get advice from more senior people who you really respect, that can help you to go through this tough process. I understand that the PhD life I'm still both of us are still like the junior faculty members, and I think that the process to go through this academic journey is very tough, but it is why we are here, right? So so if you only want to study something that already replayed 10,000 times from other scholars, then that's not something that what we call PhD. And also you should have to think about something. When I think back about all this process, I still think I can still make something more decisions better, such as like I should make the calculation of each of these power estimations better, and also is like I can even design a more for example, like one survey I can, so for after this first wave of the survey in the next year, I embed like 2 experiments into one survey, right? So it is more efficient, but I didn't know how to do this in the first time.
Sure.
Right? So maybe if I did that in the first time, I can come up with like 2 papers. But again, it is a trade-off. So as a rookie of this field, that I didn't know that how even to do for one paper using this method and using this data. So I didn't have the energies to, or I want to take the risk for doing like more. But after I learned this, like okay, I can do this more efficient, right? So I can put this like to the one survey with multiple papers, and even after you've done this survey, you can, at the end of survey, to ask your audience about whether you or not you want to join into a qualitative interviews or focus groups, that you can have a deeper connections with the practitioners to understand more realistic questions they face in their daily work, right? So it is like when we are thinking about the suggestions by my younger me or by other junior scholars, that when you're thinking about one research, you can always think about the potential of this research to expand your future career, right? So you are not only to eating this one time, but you can just try to use this repeatedly and more efficient to make your to make multiple works and to contribute in different ways. And yes, and that's the suggestion. And again, finally, I think that don't think about like we are junior scholars, so we don't have the power to do these very difficult works or very ambitious research like those very established professors. But also to think about maybe that can be, if you can make this done, it can largely increase your confidence that it's like, okay, I firmly believe that I can do more things and I can contribute more to the field, and I can establish the conversations with those very established papers that I respect, right? So and also we are standing on the shoulders of those giants.
Sure.
Just I appreciate all those very influential papers I read to help me to build this research idea. And this is a process about research, and this is the amazing part and the part we love to be academic.
Yeah, I think this is like a wonderful reminder of, we should always be ambitious, and there's things that we can learn in our ambition, but just getting started most of the time is like you just have to start. And if that comes from reaching out to those giants or being a little bit aggressive and risky, we'll always learn along the way. But starting, you just have to start. So I really appreciate this sentiment. Yixin, I want to thank you for joining us for this hour here. I enjoyed the paper, and I'm just very happy that we got to talk here on the podcast. Also, I just want to remind for all those that are listening to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast here. Additionally, follow Art of Science Pod on Twitter, now called X. So I just kind of want to wrap up again, thanking Yixin for being here today, but also thanking Policy Studies Journal and the Center of Policy Design and Governance at Syracuse University for supporting this joint initiative. And with that, we'll see you next quarter with the new issue of PSJ.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.